The auction. The air was thick with heat and the smell of sweat, oil, and the pungent aroma of alien spices. It was the kind of place where hope was a rare commodity, a place where life was sold to the highest bidder. In this dark corner of the galaxy, slaves were treated as nothing more than objects, their pain and suffering invisible to those with wealth and power. At the center of the marketplace stood a large metallic platform, raised just enough to allow the buyers to inspect their property from all angles. The crowd around the platform murmured with excitement, their voices low and greedy. Alien merchants in their dark robes stood proudly by, their faces hidden in shadows, ready to sell off lives for the right price. And there, in the middle of it all, stood her. The alien slave girl was young, no older than 20 in human years. Her greenish skin was covered in bruises, marks of a life lived in constant suffering. Her hair, once long and flowing, was now chopped unevenly. And her eyes, large, dark, and full of fear, betrayed her every emotion. She stood still, her hands bound tightly behind her back. The chains around her wrists glinted in the dim light as her captors shoved her onto the platform. The audience went silent for a moment as they stared at her. She was beautiful in a way that made her stand out even more in this cruel place, but it was not beauty that would fetch her the highest price. No, it was her broken spirit, her helplessness, and the fear in her eyes. The auctioneer, a tall, pale-skinned alien with a smooth voice, raised his hand, and the crowd immediately quieted down. He surveyed the girl as if she were nothing more than a piece of meat for sale. He smiled coldly, his sharp teeth glinting in the low light. "Here we have a rare specimen, gentlemen and ladies of the galaxy. A young slave from the planet Tychona," the auctioneer said in a voice laced with excitement. "Her strength, her beauty, her fear, all will be yours, at the right price." The girl flinched at the words. The thought of being bought, again, made her stomach twist. She had been sold before, over and over, to cruel masters who only wanted to break her more. This time, she wasn't sure she could take it. She had heard stories of the things buyers did to their slaves, especially the young ones. Torture, beating, humiliation, all for their amusement. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the sounds, trying to find some small part of herself that wasn't afraid. The auctioneer turned to the crowd. "Let's begin the bidding. Start at 20,000 credits." A murmur ran through the crowd. The first bid came quickly from a short, bald alien with thick, muscled arms. 25,000, he shouted eagerly. 30,000. Another bidder called, a well-dressed human man in a black suit, his eyes glinting with greed. He leaned forward, eyeing the girl like she was a prize he had to win. His voice was calm, but there was something about him, something that made the girl's stomach churn with fear. The girl's heart raced. Each bid, each increase in price, made her feel smaller, more helpless. She had been through this before, but every time, it felt like the first. The hopelessness crept in, the feeling that there was no escape, no future beyond the chains. Then she saw him. In the back of the crowd, standing alone, was a man, human, but older than the others. His face was lined with age, his hair peppered with gray, and his eyes were different. There was no greed in them, no hunger for power or control. He looked tired, almost as if he had seen too much in his lifetime, and wanted nothing more than to leave this place behind. His gaze was fixed on her, and for a brief moment, she thought she saw a flicker of sympathy in his eyes. But sympathy wouldn't save her. No one cared about slaves. Not here. Not in this place. 40,000, shouted a tall, reptilian creature with yellow eyes. It hissed and bared its teeth, eager for its prize. The girl's heart sank. There was no way to escape now. But then, a voice cut through the noise, steady and calm. 50,000. The crowd quieted, and every eye turned toward the older human man. The girl's heart skipped a beat. He had bid. The auctioneer raised an eyebrow. 50,000 credits, a generous offer, but we are just getting started. Are there any higher bids? The crowd hesitated. The man's bid seemed unexpected, out of place. This wasn't the kind of bidding war they were used to. Usually, the prices would soar, the stakes rising with each call. But here was a man who seemed in no hurry, as if he knew the game and was playing by his own rules. 50,000, going once. The auctioneer's voice rang out, his hands in the air. Going twice. The girl could hardly breathe. Was this it? Would this man buy her and then disappear into the galaxy like so many others? Or was there something different about him? The crowd was growing restless, but no one else bid. The girl's heart pounded louder in her chest as the auctioneer called out one last time. Sold. The girl's body went limp. She had been sold again. She looked up at the human man as he stepped forward, his face unreadable. The fear still gripped her, but something in his gaze made her pause. Could he be different? As the chains were removed from her wrists, she took a step back. The man reached out, but she recoiled, too afraid to trust. He didn't move closer, didn't try to touch her. He only nodded at the alien guards to lead her away. For the first time in years, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she might be wrong about this man. The reveal. The auctioneer's voice echoed through the darkened marketplace, selling the girl like an object, his words a blur of cold transactions, a beautiful creature, capable of serving in the most intimate ways, strong, resilient, and willing to obey. The girl, her heart pounding in her chest, couldn't stop the tears that slipped down her cheeks. She knew what awaited her next. Another master, another tormentor, perhaps even worse than the last. But then she saw him. He stood at the back of the crowd, his face hidden beneath the shadow of a hood. A middle-aged human man, older than most of the other bidders. He didn't look like the typical buyer. His clothes were simple, worn from years of travel, but there was an aura about him, a quiet strength. When their eyes met, something flickered in her chest, a spark of recognition, or perhaps an echo of something she had long forgotten. Hope. The bidding war ended quickly, and with a soft chime, the auctioneer declared the sale complete. The crowd dispersed, some muttering in disappointment, others with a grin of satisfaction. The girl was quickly led away, her chains rattling with each step, heart thundering as she was guided to the back of the room where the human man awaited. Her instincts screamed at her to fight, to run, to do anything to escape, but the guards were too strong. They pushed her toward the man, who was now standing in the shadows, his face still obscured. His hands were steady as he reached out to take her chains, unlocking them with a single swift motion. "Wah! What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice trembling. She braced herself for the cruel sting of a slap or the feel of a whip across her back. She was prepared for violence, prepared to be hurt once again. But nothing came. The man's eyes met hers, dark, soulful, and filled with something strange. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, his voice low and calm, like a breeze on a stormy day. He spoke with a gentle certainty that sent a wave of confusion through her. She backed away, eyes darting around for an escape. "Liar, you bought me to torture me, didn't you? Just like the others. I'll never serve you. I'll never obey." The man didn't move. He didn't flinch. Instead, he spoke again, quieter this time. "I didn't buy you to hurt you. I bought you to save you." The words were soft, like a promise. They didn't make sense. Save her. From what? From this place. From him. The girl didn't know whether to believe him. No one had ever spoken to her like this. No one had ever been so calm in the face of her anger and fear. "You think you can save me?" She spat, her voice shaking with fury. "What's the point? This place will break me. The chains will never come off. I'll never be free." The man stepped closer, his hands held out in a gesture of peace. "I'm not offering freedom yet," he said, his gaze soft but unwavering. "But I'm offering something that no one else ever has, A chance to be something other than a slave. A chance to fight back. You're not the only one trapped here. For the first time, she hesitated. She could feel the weight of his words, the tension in the air between them. He wasn't trying to control her, wasn't threatening her. He was offering something entirely different. A path forward, a way to escape this cycle of suffering. But could she trust him? Could she trust anyone? "Why should I believe you?" she whispered, her voice small, almost fragile. The man's eyes softened further, his expression full of compassion. "Because I've seen what happens when people believe they're beyond saving," he said quietly. "And I won't let that happen to you." The girl's heart skipped a beat. She wanted to believe him, to trust him, but her instincts screamed that this was too good to be true. She had seen too many broken promises, too many lies. Could she truly let herself hope again? Before she could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. She froze, a mixture of fear and confusion filling her. The man's expression darkened, his body tense. "We don't have much time," he said, urgency in his voice. "They'll be looking for you." "What?" she gasped. "Who?" "Not everyone here is what they seem," he muttered, glancing around. "And we don't have much time before they come for you." The girl's breath caught in her throat. Who was this man? What did he know about this place? And who was coming for her? Just as she opened her mouth to ask, the door slammed open with a violent crash. Figures cloaked in shadows rushed into the room, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. The man stood firm, moving protectively in front of her. "Get ready," he said. "This is only the beginning." The tension in the air thickened, and the girl's heart pounded faster than it ever had before. The truth behind his actions. The man gently pushed the chains from her wrists, his hand surprisingly warm as he steadied her when she stumbled. For a moment, she didn't know what to do. Her mind raced with confusion and suspicion. Was this a trick? Was he lulling her into a false sense of safety before delivering even worse torment than before? She took a step back, wary of his intentions. "What do you want from me?" she demanded, her voice sharp and trembling. She kept her distance, her body tense like a coiled spring, ready to run at the slightest provocation. The man seemed unfazed. He didn't move to touch her again, nor did he raise his voice. Instead, he spoke softly, calmly, as though the horrors of the marketplace, the cruel bidding and the years of suffering, didn't exist in this small, quiet space. "I don't want anything from you," he said, his voice low and steady. "I want to help you." Her eyes narrowed. "Help?" she scoffed, disbelief filling her voice. "Who are you to help me? You bought me. I'm your slave now." The man's face darkened, but his eyes remained kind. He shook his head slowly. "I didn't buy you to enslave you, to make you suffer. I bought you because I want to end this, for both of us." Her brows furrowed in confusion. "End what?" "I don't understand." The man sighed, running a hand over his face, as if the weight of his words was almost too heavy to bear. "I'm not like the others. I've fought in the wars, fought for a cause that I believed in. But now, I fight for something more personal. I fight to stop this. The trafficking, the buying, the selling of lives. It's wrong." She stared at him in stunned silence. His words weren't like anything she had ever heard from her captors. There was no hunger in his voice, no desire for power. It was almost too pure, too sincere. She took another step back, shaking her head. "You're a liar. You're just like the others. No one does anything for free in this galaxy." Her voice cracked with frustration. Years of pain and betrayal flooded through her, and she couldn't stop herself from lashing out. "You've brought me here to do something awful, haven't you? Torture me, break me down. You're no different than the rest." He watched her, his expression softening with a mix of sadness and understanding. "No," he said quietly. "I bought you because I believe you deserve a chance to be free." The words hung in the air, impossible to believe. Freedom. She had heard such promises before, only to be crushed by the reality of the next blow. But there was something in his eyes, something that made her pause. She couldn't explain it, but it felt different. "You don't understand," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I've been broken too many times. I don't know how to trust anymore." The man nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving hers. "I don't expect you to trust me right away. I know that trust is earned, not given, but I'll prove it to you. Every day. I'll show you that you're more than just a slave. You're a person, worthy of freedom, of choice, of dignity." Her heart raced as the words began to sink in. She wanted to believe him, wanted to throw herself into his arms and let the pain of years of suffering melt away. But the walls she had built were too strong, too high. She wasn't ready to lower them yet. "I don't know," she whispered, turning away, unsure of what to do next. "I can't just forget everything." "You don't have to forget," he replied, his voice calm and steady. "But you can start healing. With time, with trust, and with me." As she walked to the small cot he had prepared for her, her mind was a storm of emotions. She lay down, staring up at the dark ceiling, unable to shake the strange feeling growing inside her, a mix of fear and something else, a tiny seed of hope. The room fell silent. Only the distant hum of the ship filled the void. And as the man quietly left the room, closing the door behind him, the girl realized she had taken the first step. She didn't know where this path would lead, but for the first time in years, she wasn't certain that it would end in pain. But the question remained, could she truly trust him? Or would the cycle of betrayal repeat itself once again? The unlikely alliance. The silence between them stretched for what felt like an eternity, heavy with doubt and disbelief. The girl stood frozen, her mind whirling, trying to make sense of this human before her. Could he really mean what he said? Or was he just another manipulative master, using kindness as a prelude to cruelty? She glanced around the dimly lit room, her instincts telling her to be cautious, to run if given the chance. Yet, for some reason, her feet remained planted. It was as if her very soul was trying to decipher the truth in this man's eyes. But all she could see was a weariness that mirrored her own, a soul battered by battles fought for causes that seemed far away, too distant to reach. "You've been through too much," the man said, breaking the silence at last. His voice was softer now, tinged with something almost like regret. "I can't undo the things that have been done to you. But I can give you a choice. I can give you a chance to decide what comes next." She blinked, her throat tightening. A choice. Her voice was barely a whisper, a part of her afraid to believe that something as simple as freedom might still be possible. The man nodded. "I'm not here to force you. You're not a possession to me. I've fought enough battles, and now I'm fighting to stop what happened to you from happening to others. I can't do it alone. But maybe together we can change things." The girl took a shaky breath, her mind still reeling. "But if I join you, if I trust you, what happens to me? Will I just become a tool for your fight? Another pawn in some grand scheme?" For the first time, the man's expression faltered. His shoulders slumped slightly, and his eyes darkened with the weight of everything he had seen. "I won't lie to you. The road ahead is dangerous. You'll be risking your life if you come with me. But I can promise you one thing. I won't use you. Not like they did. Not like they do." The girl took another step back, her mind at war with itself. She didn't trust easily, not after everything she had endured. But there was something about the man's words, something in the quiet urgency of his voice, that felt different from every other promise made to her by those who had owned her. "Why me?" she asked finally, her voice quieter now, though the wariness remained. "Why did you choose me?" The man's eyes softened as he met her gaze. "I've seen too many lives destroyed. But I've also seen how strong people can be, how resilient they are. And I think you might be stronger than you know. You're not just a slave, not just a victim. You're someone who's survived, someone who can help make a change." The girl's heart thundered in her chest. She had spent so long running from her past, from everything she was forced to endure, that she never thought there could be something more, something beyond survival. Could this human be offering her an escape from her nightmare? Or was this yet another false hope? Before she could speak, the man held up a small device in his hand, a sleek, metallic communicator. I can't offer you safety, but I can offer you something far more important, the chance to fight back. We have allies, people who care, and we need someone with your experience to help us bring this system down. The girl stared at the device. It was a link to something she had never dared to hope for, a chance to not just survive, but to fight, to take back control of her own life. But could she trust him? Her fingers tightened into fists at her sides as the weight of the decision pressed upon her. For the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of something else, something she had thought long lost. Could she fight again? Would she fight for something that wasn't just her own survival? "All right," she whispered, finally breaking her silence. "I'll join you." The man gave her a small, almost imperceptible smile. It wasn't a smile of triumph, but one of understanding, a recognition of the trust she had just given him, a trust that had been torn apart by years of pain and fear. "We have much work to do," he said, his voice firm now, resolute. "But you're not alone. Not anymore." As the girl nodded, she realized something deep inside her. This wasn't just a chance to escape. This was a chance to reshape the future, to turn her pain into power, to make sure that no one else would have to endure what she had. And for the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, freedom was possible. The dangerous path ahead. The man paused, his gaze distant as though remembering the countless battles he had fought, the countless lives lost in the name of something greater. He looked back at the girl, his expression a mixture of determination and vulnerability. "The truth is," he said quietly, "you've already been through hell. You've seen the worst of what this galaxy has to offer. I can't promise that it will be easy from here on out, but I can promise you this: you'll never be alone again." The girl took a step back, her breath hitching. Her mind raced, torn between the unfamiliar comfort in his words and the deep-rooted fear that had been etched into her very being for as long as she could remember. Her entire life had been defined by captivity, by chains, by violence, by being forced to serve the whims of others. Could she really trust this man? Could she walk away from that life and risk everything? "You want me to fight with you," she said softly, more to herself than to him. "But what if I can't? What if I'm not strong enough?" The man's eyes softened, his voice gentle but firm. "You don't have to fight like me. You don't have to carry that weight. But your strength is more than you realize. It's not about fighting with weapons. It's about surviving, about choosing something better for yourself. You deserve that choice." His words struck her like a bolt of lightning, awakening something inside her that had been dormant for so long. Hope. It felt foreign, almost dangerous. But it was there, like a flickering flame in the dark. She wasn't just a slave anymore. She could be more. But what would that mean for her? What would it mean for someone like her, someone who had only ever known how to survive? "I don't know how to trust anymore," she said, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and longing. "Every time I did, it only led to pain." The man nodded, understanding the depth of her trauma. "I get it. I've seen it too. But sometimes you have to take the leap. Not for me. For you." The girl stood still, her hands clenched into fists, her mind spinning. She could feel the weight of her decision pressing on her shoulders, but it wasn't the crushing weight of slavery anymore. No, this was something else. A choice. The power to decide her own fate. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "I want to believe that there's more than just pain, more than just surviving." The man stepped closer, his presence a quiet strength. "Then believe. And let me show you what's beyond the walls of this place." Her heart raced as she looked up at him, the uncertainty still there but now mingled with something else, a glimmer of trust, a glimmer of hope. But the path ahead was fraught with danger. The slavers who had sold her weren't the only threat she would face. There were other, darker forces at play, forces that would stop at nothing to keep her, and anyone like her, in chains. "Once we leave, there's no turning back," the man warned. "There's no going back to safety, only the unknown." The girl swallowed hard. "I've been in the unknown my whole life." The man smiled, though it was tinged with sadness. "Then, together, we'll find something worth fighting for." They turned toward the door, the girl's heart pounding with a mix of fear and anticipation. She wasn't just escaping anymore. She was stepping into a future of her own making, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't sure what awaited her, but she knew one thing. She would face it, no matter what. And that was more than she had ever hoped for. The test of trust. The man's gaze softened, and he stepped closer, not in a threatening way, but with a calm, unhurried presence. There was no fear in his movements, no sign of manipulation, only a quiet strength that felt almost out of place in this cruel corner of the galaxy. "I know," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. "Trust isn't something that can be given freely, especially when you've been broken. But trust doesn't have to come all at once. You can take it one step at a time." The girl, her eyes still filled with hesitation, studied him. There was something about the way he spoke, something in the weight of his words that made her feel heard, seen, perhaps for the first time in her life. But the doubts crept in, gnawing at her mind like hungry predators. She had been betrayed too many times to be naive. "Why me?" she asked, her voice raw with emotion. "There are hundreds of slaves here. You could have chosen any of them. Why save me?" The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gave a small, rueful smile. "Maybe it's because I saw something in you that the others didn't, something that reminded me of myself when I was younger. A fire that hadn't been completely snuffed out. You're stronger than you know. I can see it in you." She looked away, struggling to keep the tears at bay. "I don't feel strong. I feel broken." "I know," he said gently. "But it's the broken pieces that make us who we are. It's how we put ourselves back together that matters. And you don't have to do it alone." She met his eyes again, her breath shallow as the weight of his words sunk in. For the first time, she felt the stirrings of something she thought had died long ago. Hope. The kind of hope that wasn't about escaping the darkness, but about having the courage to step into the light, however uncertain the path ahead might be. The moment was broken by a distant sound, sharp, mechanical, the unmistakable hum of a shuttle approaching. The man's eyes flickered toward the window, then back to her. "We don't have much time. The people who sold you are going to come looking. If you're with me, it's not just your life on the line anymore. It's ours." The girl felt the weight of his words sink deep into her chest. The decision was no longer just about survival. It was about making a choice that would shape everything to come. She could stay in this small, dimly lit room and wait for the inevitable, or she could take a leap into the unknown. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady, though she could see the tension in his shoulders. There was no turning back now. The girl hesitated for a breath, the flickering flame of hope in her heart growing just a little brighter. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. "I'm ready." And with that simple gesture, she stepped into the unknown. The beginning of freedom. The girl stood there, the man's words hanging in the air like a promise, a fragile, delicate thing that could shatter just as easily as it had formed. But for the first time in her life, she felt the faintest stirrings of something she had long forgotten. A future. She turned her gaze to the window behind the man, staring out at the endless expanse of stars, a galaxy teeming with life, each star a distant world filled with untold possibilities. She had once dreamed of freedom, but that dream had felt impossible, crushed by the weight of the chains and the reality of her captivity. But now the stars didn't feel so far away. "Maybe I could try," she said, her voice barely a whisper. The words seemed almost foreign to her, but they felt right. They felt like the first step on a path she had never dared to take. The man smiled, but there was no arrogance in his expression. There was no smug sense of having saved her. Instead, it was a smile of understanding, a recognition that this wasn't a victory for him, but a beginning for both of them. "I can't promise that it will be easy," he said softly, "and there will be days when you'll doubt yourself. There will be moments where you feel like giving up. But I promise you this, I'll be right there beside you." She swallowed hard, the weight of the decision settling on her shoulders. She wasn't just choosing a new life for herself. She was choosing to stand beside him, to fight not just for survival, but for something far greater. A chance to take back what had been stolen from her. "Where do we start?" she asked, her voice steadier now, the lingering tremors of doubt replaced by something stronger, resolve. The man's eyes sparkled with quiet pride. "We start by taking the first step, together." And so, for the first time in her life, the girl stepped into the unknown, no longer shackled by fear or chains. With the man beside her, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, a glimmer of freedom, fragile but real. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with danger and challenges, but it was hers to choose. The galaxy had taken so much from her, but now, for the first time, she had the power to reclaim it. And with that power, a fire ignited within her, a fire that would burn brighter with every step they took toward the horizon, a fire that would never be extinguished again. Together, they walked into the future, the stars stretching out before them, waiting for them to claim their place among them.